What would you do if you could see everyone who had ever died? They whisper to me, beg me, follow me through the streets. I thought it was a curse, until he came. The White Rider, the final breath, the end of all stories. He told me I was special, chosen, meant to be his queen. But becoming death's bride means leaving life forever. Would you sacrifice everything for a love beyond death? The first time I saw a dead person, I was 7 years old. My grandmother had been laid to rest that morning, her frail body finally succumbing to the wasting sickness that had plagued our village for months. The funeral was small, somber, attended only by those brave enough to risk exposure to whatever evil spirits might linger around death. But as we walked away from the cemetery, I saw her. Grandmother stood by her own gravestone, translucent and shimmering, her eyes filled with a sadness that cut through my child's heart like ice. She reached for me with ghostly fingers, her mouth moving in silent words I couldn't understand. "Mama," I whispered, tugging at my mother's black funeral dress. "Grandmother is still there." My mother's face went white as fresh snow. She grabbed my shoulders, her grip tight enough to bruise. "Luna, you must never say such things. Never. Do you understand?" But I did see her. Just like I saw the baker's son who had drowned in the well the previous spring, still wandering the market square with algae in his hair. Just like I saw the old priest who continued to kneel in prayer before the altar, unaware that his earthly body lay rotting 6 feet underground. The dead were everywhere, and only I could see them. But what Luna didn't know was that her gift would soon attract something far more dangerous than restless spirits. 15 years later, the plague arrived like a lover in the night, silent, seductive, and utterly deadly. It started with the Hartwell family, on the outskirts of our village. Margaret Hartwell, the seamstress, had been complaining of fever and chills. By the 3rd day, she was dead. By the 7th day, her entire family had joined her in the realm I alone could perceive. The plague spread through our village like fire through dry wheat. Bodies piled in the streets faster than they could be buried. The church bells tolled constantly, a death knell that drove some villagers to madness and others to their knees in desperate prayer. I worked as a healer's apprentice, one of the few who dared tend to the sick. Not because I was brave, but because I had nowhere else to go. My parents had succumbed to the plague 3 months earlier, leaving me with nothing but a cottage that reeked of death and a gift that grew stronger with each passing day. The dead didn't just watch me anymore, they spoke to me. "Help us," whispered Margaret Hartwell, her spectral form hovering over her youngest daughter's sickbed. "We can't find our way. Tell my husband I hid the silver beneath the floorboards," pleaded the miller's wife, her ethereal fingers clutching at my sleeve. "Why won't my children look at me?" sobbed the blacksmith, standing over his mourning family like a guardian they couldn't see. I tried to help them, tried to pass along their messages, but the living were too consumed by grief and fear to listen. They called me cursed, touched by evil. Some even whispered that I was the one bringing the plague, that my communion with the dead was somehow spreading the sickness. So I learned to keep their secrets, to bear their sorrows alone. The dead weren't just watching anymore. They were warning her. "Please," her father begged, kneeling beside her bed. "You have to save her. She's all I have left." But I could already see her ghost standing in the corner of the room, young and translucent, watching her own dying body with curiosity rather than fear. Sarah was already gone. Her spirit had simply chosen not to leave yet. "I'm sorry," I whispered, placing a cool cloth on her burning forehead. "There's nothing more I can do." Thomas Chen broke down in sobs that shook his massive frame. The sound was heartbreaking, raw with the kind of grief that could drive a man to madness. I had heard it too many times, seen too many families destroyed by this cursed plague. As if summoned by his despair, a chill wind swept through the room, extinguishing every candle simultaneously. The temperature dropped so suddenly that our breath became visible in small puffs of white vapor. through the frosted window. I saw him, a figure on horseback, silhouetted against the full moon. His mount was pure white, its coat gleaming like fresh snow, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The rider himself was tall and imposing, dressed in robes that seemed to be woven from starlight and shadow. Even from a distance, I felt the weight of his gaze upon me. The white rider dismounted with fluid grace, his boots making no sound as they touched the cobblestone street. He walked toward the tavern with purpose, each step measured and deliberate. Thomas Chen was so consumed by grief that he noticed nothing, but every spirit in the room turned toward the approaching figure, their ghostly faces filled with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "He's here," whispered Sarah's spirit, her voice barely audible even to my supernatural hearing. "The White Rider comes for the crossing." My heart hammered against my ribs as footsteps echoed on the tavern stairs. Heavy, measured, inevitable. The door opened without anyone touching it, and cold air flooded the room, like water rushing into a sinking ship. Death's proposal came with a price she never expected to pay. He was beautiful in the way that winter storms are beautiful. Terrible and magnificent and utterly destructive. But it was his presence that truly marked him as otherworldly. Power radiated from him, like heat from a forge. Ancient and absolute. When he looked at someone, they became the only person in existence. When he spoke, the very air seemed to listen. "Thomas Chen," he said, his voice like distant thunder. "Your daughter's time has come." The tavern keeper looked up with red-rimmed eyes, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Please," he whispered, "please don't take her. She's just a child." The White Rider's expression softened with something that might have been compassion. "Death is not a punishment, Thomas Chen. It is a release from suffering. Your daughter will know peace." He moved to Sarah's bedside and placed one long-fingered hand on her forehead. The fever broke instantly, her labored breathing easing into something deeper, more natural. For a moment, hope flickered in her father's eyes. Then Sarah's ghost stepped forward and merged with her dying body in a flash of silver light. "Go well, young one," the White Rider murmured, and Sarah Chen drew her last breath with a smile on her lips. Thomas Chen's wail of grief echoed through the night, but I barely heard it. The White Rider had turned those twilight eyes on me, and suddenly nothing else in the world mattered. "Luna," he said, and my name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "I have been watching you." My tongue felt thick and useless in my mouth. How do you know my name?" A smile ghosted across his perfect features. "I know many things about you. I know that you see those who linger between worlds. I know that you bear their sorrows as if they were your own. I know that you have been alone for far too long." He stepped closer, and the temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. Ice crystals began to form on the windows, spreading outward in delicate patterns that looked like frozen flowers. "Who are you?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer in my heart. "I am Thanatos," he said, his voice carrying the weight of eternity. "The White Rider, the final breath, the guardian of the crossing. Some call me Death, though I prefer to think of myself as a shepherd, guiding souls from one existence to another." He reached out and touched my cheek with the backs of his fingers. His skin was cold as winter morning, but something deep inside me bloomed with warmth at the contact. "And you, Luna, are the bridge I have been searching for." But Luna was about to discover she wasn't the first bride he had chosen. "I don't understand," I breathed, my skin tingling where he had touched me. Thanatos let his hand fall away, but his eyes never left mine. "You see the dead because you stand at the threshold between worlds. Part of you has always existed in my realm. Luna, that is why they are drawn to you, why they trust you with their secrets and sorrows." Around us, the temperature continued to drop. Thomas Chen had fallen silent, his grief temporarily suspended by the otherworldly cold that filled the room. Even the spirits that usually crowded around me had retreated to the shadows. watching our exchange with wide, frightened eyes. For millennia, I have walked alone, Thanatos continued, his voice soft but carrying an undertone of infinite loneliness, guiding souls across the threshold, maintaining the balance between life and death. It is isolating work. He turned away from me, moving to the frosted window. In the moonlight, his white robes seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. But you, Luna, you could be my companion, my equal, my queen. My heart stuttered to a stop. Your queen, he faced me again. And for the first time, I saw vulnerability in those ancient eyes. Marry me, Luna. Become my bride, and I will show you wonders beyond mortal imagination. You will rule beside me in the realm of spirits, loved and honored by all who pass through our domain. The offer hung in the air between us like a physical thing, beautiful and terrible and impossible to ignore. I thought of my lonely life in this plague-ravaged village, of the endless parade of death and sorrow that had become my existence. Thanatos hesitated, and in that pause I heard my answer. You would become as I am, he said carefully. Immortal, powerful, forever young, and beautiful, but you would leave the mortal world behind. Luna, there would be no returning to this realm once you crossed the threshold. I would have to die, you would have to choose. He stepped closer again, his presence overwhelming in its intensity. Choose me over mortality. Choose eternity over a few brief decades of suffering. Choose love over loneliness. Love, the word echoed in my mind like a bell, tolling. Could this magnificent, terrible being truly love someone like me? A plague-scarred village girl with no family, no prospects, no future worth speaking of. As if reading my thoughts, Thanatos reached for my hands, his fingers intertwined with mine, and suddenly I could feel everything he felt. The weight of centuries, the burden of guiding countless souls to their rest, and underneath it all, a longing so deep and profound it took my breath away. I have watched you for months, he whispered, seen your kindness to the dying, your compassion for the lost spirits that seek you out. You tend to death with such grace. Luna, you would be perfect as my queen. The warmth in my chest spread outward, chasing away the supernatural cold that filled the room. For a moment I let myself imagine it, ruling beside him in some otherworldly palace, beloved and powerful, never again lonely or afraid. But then I thought of the living world I would leave behind, the few survivors who depended on my healing skills, the spirits who sought my help in finding peace. I need time to think, I said. Thanatos nodded, though disappointment flickered across his perfect features. Of course, this is not a decision to be made lightly. He raised my hands to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to my knuckles. The touch sent electricity racing up my arms, and for a wild moment I almost threw caution to the wind and said yes. I will return tomorrow night, he said, and Luna, dream of me. With that, he released my hands and strode toward the door. It opened before he reached it, and cold wind swirled through the room, extinguishing what few candles had been relit. When the wind died down, he was gone. The only evidence of his visit was the ice still clinging to the windows and the profound silence that had fallen over the room. Thomas Chen looked around in confusion, as if waking from a dream. Sarah's body lay peaceful on the bed, her face serene in death, and he began to weep anew. But I barely noticed. My mind was spinning with questions and possibilities, fear and desire warring in my chest. The angel of death wanted to marry me, and God help me, part of me wanted to say yes. The real horror wasn't loving death, it was what he was running from. That night, sleep eluded me like smoke through grasping fingers. I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the wind howl through the empty streets. The plague had claimed so many that entire sections of the village stood abandoned, their windows dark and their doors hanging open like dead mouths. But it wasn't the eerie quiet that kept me awake. It was the memory of Thanatos's touch, the way his fingers had felt against mine, cold and warm simultaneously, the way his voice had wrapped around my name like silk. "Dream of me," he had said, as if I could dream of anything else. When exhaustion finally claimed me near dawn, my dreams were filled with impossible visions. I saw myself dressed in flowing gowns made of starlight and shadow, standing beside Thanatos on a throne carved from black crystal. Spirits bowed before us, not in fear but in reverence and gratitude. In the dream, I was beautiful. My plain brown hair had become lustrous and dark. My pale skin glowed with inner light, and my eyes were the same, twilight color as his. "Welcome home, my queen," Dream Thanatos whispered, and when he kissed me, I tasted eternity on his lips. I woke with tears on my cheeks and an ache in my chest that felt like homesickness for a place I had never been. The morning brought no relief from my turmoil. I went through the motions of my daily routine, checking on the few remaining sick, tending my herb garden, preparing tinctures and tonics that did little good against the plague's advance. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the White Rider and his impossible proposal. The spirits that usually sought me out seemed different today. They watched me with new intensity, whispering among themselves in voices I couldn't quite catch. Margaret Hartwell, who had been following me around for weeks, finally approached as I knelt in my garden. "You spoke with him," she said, her ghostly form shimmering in the morning sunlight. I looked up from the rosemary I was harvesting. "You saw?" "We all saw." She gestured to the dozen other spirits that had materialized around my garden. "The White Rider has never paid such attention to a mortal before." An elderly man I didn't recognize stepped forward. "I have been dead for 40 years," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "In all that time, I have watched him guide souls to their rest. He is alone, always alone. Until now," added the baker's son, his young face serious despite the algae still tangled in his hair. "You could give him peace, Luna, as he's given peace to so many others." I sat back on my heels, studying their translucent faces. "You want me to marry him?" "We want you to be happy," Margaret said gently. "And we want him to be happy. You carry so much sorrow for one so young. Perhaps it is time to lay that burden down." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at my heart. Yes, Thanatos was magnificent and powerful and impossibly beautiful. Yes, he offered me love and eternity and a crown beside his throne. But he also offered death. The permanent abandonment of everything and everyone I had ever known. "There's something you're not telling me," I said, studying Margaret's face. "What is it?" The spirits exchanged glances, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with supernatural cold. "Tell me," I insisted. Margaret wrung her ghostly hands. "There have been others, Luna, other brides he has chosen over the centuries." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. "Others?" "Not many," the elderly man said quickly. "Perhaps a dozen in all the ages of the world. Women who could see between the realms, who carry death in their hearts as you do." "What happened to them?" I whispered, though I dreaded the answer. "They said yes," Margaret replied, her voice barely audible. "They crossed over to become his queens, and they were changed." "Changed how?" "They became like him, immortal, powerful." She paused, cold. The baker's son nodded sadly. "The last one was 3 centuries ago. A plague maiden, like yourself, from a village in the far north. After she joined him, there were no more gentle crossings, no more peaceful deaths, only swift, efficient endings. She made him harder," the elderly man explained, "more distant, as if loving a mortal had somehow damaged his capacity for compassion." I felt sick. "You're saying that if I marry him, I'll make him worse?" "We're saying," Margaret said carefully, "that love changes both the lover and the beloved, and some changes cannot be undone." I stared at my hands. Dirt from the garden still caked under my fingernails. Such ordinary hands. Mortal hands. Could they really belong to someone destined to become the bride of death himself? That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, I sat by my window and waited for Thanatos to return. The spirits had withdrawn, giving me space to think, but their warnings echoed in my mind. Some changes cannot be undone. When he appeared in my doorway, materializing from shadow and starlight, my heart clenched with longing and fear in equal measure. "Have you made your decision?" he asked, his voice soft as velvet. I looked into those twilight eyes and saw eternity stretching before me like an endless, beautiful, terrible road. "I have questions first." Yet something stirred within Luna that night, something that would change the balance between life and death forever. Thanatos stepped into my cottage with that same fluid grace, his presence immediately filling the small space with otherworldly power. Tonight, he seemed more solid somehow, more real. When he moved, his robes rustled like autumn leaves, and I caught the faint scent of winter roses and starlight. "Ask," he said simply, settling into the chair across from my small dining table. Even seated, he radiated an aura of barely contained power. I had spent the day preparing for this conversation, but now that he was here, the questions tumbled out in a rush. The spirits told me about the others. Your previous brides. Something flickered across his perfect features, pain, perhaps, or regret. They did they? Were they telling the truth? Have there been others like me? Thanatos was quiet for so long that I began to wonder if he would answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of millennia. "Yes, there have been others. What happened to them? But not happy?" This time, the pause was even longer. "Happiness is a mortal concept, Luna. It requires the possibility of loss, the awareness of time's passage. When you become immortal, when you see the endless cycle of life and death from the perspective of eternity." He trailed off, then shook his head. "They found purpose in their new existence. That should be enough." But it wasn't enough, was it? I could hear the loneliness in his voice, the desperate ache he was trying so hard to hide. How many perfect, eternal, emotionally distant queens had he ruled beside? How many times had he watched love transform into cold duty? "Tell me about the last one," I said. "The plague maiden from the north." Thanatos stiffened, his shoulders drawing taut beneath his starlight robes. "Lorelei. Her name was Lorelei." The way he said her name, soft, reverent, wounded, told me everything I needed to know about how deeply he had loved her. "She was like you," he continued, still facing the window, touched by death but not yet claimed by it. "She could see the spirits, help them find peace. When the plague came to her village, she tended the dying with such grace." "You fell in love with her." "I fell in love with her," he agreed. "She was radiant, Luna, full of laughter and compassion and fierce, burning life. When she agreed to marry me, I thought I had found the other half of my soul." He turned from the window, and I saw raw pain written across his immortal features. The transformation, to become my equal, she had to die completely. Not just her mortal body, but her mortal heart. All the warmth, all the messy human emotions that made her so beautiful, they burned away in the crossing. My stomach dropped. She became cold. She became perfect. The word sounded like a curse on his lips. Flawlessly beautiful, infinitely powerful, absolutely efficient in her duties. She felt no sorrow for the souls we guided across, no joy in their peaceful endings. She performed her role as Death's queen without flaw and without feeling. "Did you still love her?" Thanatos closed his eyes. "I loved what she had been, but what she became, it was like loving a beautiful statue. All the fire that had drawn me to her was gone." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the evening. "What happened to her?" "She rules still, in the realm of the far north. We divided the world between us when it became clear that He opened his eyes, meeting my gaze. When it became clear that we could no longer bear each other's company, the silence that followed was deafening. I stared at this magnificent being who had offered me eternity and love, and all I could think about were the brides who had come before me, the women who had said yes to his proposal and lost themselves in the process. "Why do you want to try again?" I asked finally. "If it failed so completely before, why risk it?" He moved toward me with predatory grace, stopping just close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from his skin. "Because, Luna, you are different." "How?" "The others were touched by death." "Yes, but you were born to it. Your gift isn't something that manifested in crisis or plague. You have been seeing spirits since childhood. Death is already part of you in a way it never was for them." He reached out and cupped my face in his hands, his touch ice cold and burning hot simultaneously. "I believe that your humanity wouldn't burn away in the crossing. I believe that you could retain the warmth and compassion that make you so beautiful, even in immortality. But you don't know for certain." "No," he admitted. "I don't." I pulled back from his touch, needing space to think. "And if you're wrong, if I become like Lorelei, then I will have to live with that choice for all eternity," he said quietly. "As will you." The honesty in his voice was devastating. Here was the angel of death, admitting that he didn't know what would happen if I accepted his proposal, that he was asking me to risk everything on hope and desperate longing. "I need to see her," I said suddenly. Thanatos frowned. "What?" "Lorelei. I need to see what I might become." "Luna, that's not." "It is necessary," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "If I'm going to make this choice, I need to understand all the consequences. I need to see what happened to your last queen." Thanatos was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him weighing my request. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. But understand that the journey will be dangerous. The realm between life and death is not meant for mortals to traverse." "I understand." He held out his hand to me, palm up. "Then come, Luna. Let me show you the price of loving death." I stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. That once I saw Lorelei, once I understood the true cost of becoming Death's bride, there would be no going back to the simple ignorance of my mortal life. But I had to know. I had to see what I might become. I placed my hand in his, and the world dissolved around us. The journey through the realm between life and death was like being torn apart and reconstructed from memory. One moment I was in my cottage, my hand clasped in Thanatos' cold fingers. The next, we were hurtling through a void filled with stars and shadows, my mortal body struggling to maintain its cohesion in a place where the laws of physics held no meaning. I saw glimpses of other worlds as we traveled, kingdoms of crystal and flame, oceans that defied gravity, forests where the trees sang lamentations for the dead. But Thanatos pulled me past them all, his grip on my hand the only anchor keeping me tethered to existence. When we finally solidified, I collapsed to my knees on ground that felt like polished obsidian. The air here was thin and bitter cold, carrying the scent of winter that had lasted for centuries. "Luna." Thanatos knelt beside me, his voice tight with concern. "Can you hear me?" I managed a nod, though my vision was still spinning from the journey. Slowly, the world around me came into focus. We stood in a vast crystalline palace that seemed to be carved from glacial ice. The walls rose impossibly high, disappearing into darkness above, while the floor beneath us reflected our images like black mirror. Everything was beautiful in the way that Arctic wastelands are beautiful. Perfect, pristine, and utterly lifeless. "This is Loralei's domain," Thanatos said quietly. "The northern realm of death." As if summoned by her name, she appeared. Lorelei materialized from the shadows like winter personified. She was tall and elegant, with skin pale as fresh snow and hair the color of starlight. Her gown was woven from ice and moonbeams, hugging her perfect figure without wrinkle or flaw. When she moved, it was with mechanical grace, each step measured and precise. "Thanatos," she said, her voice carrying no more emotion than wind through bare branches. "You have brought a mortal to my realm, Lirelai." There was such pain in the way he said her name. "This is Luna. I wanted her to meet you, before she makes her choice." Those empty winter eyes turned to me, and I felt my soul being weighed and measured. "Ah, another potential bride. How interesting." She moved closer, circling me like a predator studying prey. I forced myself to stand, though my legs felt weak from our journey between realms. "She is young," Lorelei observed, "and still warm with mortal blood. Tell me, child, do you fancy yourself in love with our dear Thanatos?" She stopped in front of me, and I could see my reflection multiplied infinitely in her crystal blue eyes. "But love is a mortal luxury, dear child. When you cross over, when you become what he needs you to become, such weak emotions burn away like morning frost. You will find that duty is much more satisfying than love, purpose more fulfilling than passion." "But you're not happy," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Happy," literally tilted her head, and for a moment something flickered in those empty eyes. "Happiness is chaos. Joy is inefficiency. I am perfect now, child. I serve my function flawlessly, without the messy complications of mortal feeling." She turned to Thanatos, and I saw him flinch under her gaze. "Show her," Lorelei said. "Show her how perfectly I perform my duties now." Death came swift and clean in her domain. No lingering sickbeds, no final farewells, no peaceful crossings surrounded by loved ones. When someone's time came, Lorelei simply appeared and severed the thread of their existence with surgical precision. It was efficient. It was perfect. It was absolutely horrifying. No gentle guidance, Lorelei said with pride. No unnecessary comfort for the dying or their families. When death comes in my realm, it is clean and quick and final, much better than the messy, emotional methods Thanatos still employs. I looked at Thanatos and saw the devastation written across his features. This perfect, emotionless creature had once been the woman he loved, the passionate, compassionate plague maiden who had stolen his immortal heart. "Do you regret it?" I asked Lorelei. "Becoming this?" She considered the question with the same cold calculation she applied to everything else. "Regret implies that I would choose differently, if given the chance. But why would I choose imperfection over perfection? Why would I choose the chaos of mortal feeling over the peace of eternal purpose?" For a split second, just a fraction of a heartbeat, something cracked in Lorelei's perfect composure. Pain flashed across her features, raw and devastating, like a glimpse of the woman she had once been. Then it was gone, buried beneath layers of crystalline perfection. "The point," she said coldly, "is to serve, to fulfill one's function, without the weakness of doubt or the inefficiency of emotion. I am what every Death Queen should aspire to become." She moved to Thanatos' side, but didn't touch him. I noticed that they maintained a careful distance from each other, like two beautiful statues sharing space in a museum. "Take your mortal and go," Lorelei said. "Let her make her choice, knowing what perfection awaits her." But as we prepared to leave, she spoke one final time, her voice so quiet that only I could hear it. "Run, little mortal. Run far and fast, and never look back." The journey back to my world passed in a blur of shadows and starlight. When we materialized in my cottage, I collapsed into my chair, my mind reeling from what I had witnessed. Thanatos stood by my fireplace, his head bowed in shame. "Now you know," he said quietly. "Now you understand what your choice truly means." I studied his profile in the firelight, the sharp cheekbones, the fall of white hair across his shoulders, the way his hands trembled almost imperceptibly. He was terrified, I realized. Terrified that I would run. Terrified that I would stay. terrified of being alone for another eternity. She told me to run, I said. He nodded without looking at me. She was right to do so, but she also showed me something else. He turned to me then, hope and fear warring in his twilight eyes. She's not happy. Thanatos. For all her talk of perfection and purpose, she's miserable. Emptiness isn't peace, it's just a different kind of suffering. Luna. I stood and moved to him, placing my hands on his chest. Beneath my palms, I could feel the steady rhythm of his immortal heart. The question isn't whether I'll change if I marry you, I said. The question is whether I'll change in a way that destroys what we could have together. He covered my hands with his touch achingly cold. And what is your answer? I looked into those twilight eyes and saw forever stretching before us. Not the empty perfect eternity that Lorelei had chosen, but something messier and more beautiful and infinitely more real. Ask me again tomorrow night, I whispered. And this time, don't let me say no. But fate had other plans for Luna's choice. The next morning brought news that changed everything. I was tending to Mrs. Whitmore, the last of the plague victims still clinging to life, when young Timothy Fletcher came running to my door. His face was flushed with excitement and something that looked dangerously like hope. Miss Luna, he called, bursting into the cottage without knocking. Come quick. You have to see. Timothy? What? The Henderson baby, he interrupted, practically bouncing with excitement. She's getting better. The fever broke, and she's sitting up and she's asking for her mother. I stared at him, my healing supplies forgotten. That's impossible. She was near death yesterday. Come see for yourself. Against my better judgment, I followed Timothy through the empty streets to the Henderson cottage on the far side of the village. What I found there defied everything I thought I knew about the plague. Little Mary Henderson, who had been burning with fever for days, sat up in her bed playing with a rag doll. Her cheeks were pink with health, her eyes bright and clear. When she saw me, she smiled and waved. Luna, look. I can sit up all by myself. Her mother, Sarah Henderson, knelt beside the bed with tears streaming down her face. I don't understand it, she whispered. This morning I thought she was going to die. Then the fever just broke, like it was never there at all. I placed my hand on Mary's forehead. Her skin was cool and healthy, showing no trace of the wasting sickness that it claimed so many others. How do you feel, sweetheart? I asked. Good, Mary beamed. The pretty lady said, I would feel better soon. And she was right. Ice formed in my veins. What pretty lady? The one with the white hair and the sparkly dress. She came to see me in my dreams and said I didn't have to be sick anymore. Sarah Henderson looked puzzled. She's been talking about this dream lady all morning. Must have been a fever vision. But I knew better. Somehow, impossibly, Lorelei had intervened. The perfect, emotionless death queen had chosen to save a dying child rather than collect her soul. By evening, it was clear that something miraculous had happened. The plague was broken, not just slowing in its advance, but actively retreating. Those who survived were recovering with supernatural speed. The villagers gathered in the main square as the sun set, their voices raised in prayers of thanksgiving. For the first time in months, laughter echoed through the streets. Children played, families embraced, and through it all, I felt a growing certainty that this was connected to my visit to the Northern Realm. Somehow, seeing the choice I was about to make, had awakened something in Lorelei that she thought was gone forever. But Luna was about to discover the true price of Lorelei's intervention. As midnight approached, I waited in my cottage for Thanatos to appear. The sounds of celebration still drifted through my windows. The village was having its first true festival in months. Grateful families sharing what food they had in a massive communal feast. But my mind was elsewhere, puzzling over the day's miraculous events. Why would Lorelei intervene? What could she possibly gain by saving the plague victims? When Thanatos materialized in my doorway, I had my answer. His face was pale with something beyond his usual otherworldly pallor, his twilight eyes dark with anguish. "You know," I said. It wasn't a question. "She broke the fundamental law," he whispered, moving to my fireplace but not sitting. "No Death Lord may reverse what has been ordained. The plague victims were meant to cross over. Their time was written in the stars themselves. But she saved them anyway. She saved them anyway." He turned to me, his expression devastated. "Do you understand what this means, Luna? By changing fate, by pulling back souls that were meant to pass, she has upset the balance itself." I felt my heart sink as understanding dawned. "There will be consequences. There are already consequences." He gestured toward my window, where the sounds of celebration continued. "Every life she saved will be paid for with another. Somewhere in the world, people who were meant to live long lives will die young to restore the balance. The cosmic order demands equilibrium." "How many?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. I sank into my chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Lorelei's choice. She had saved the plague victims, knowing full well that others would die in their place. It was an act of compassion that would result in tragedy on an unimaginable scale. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would she do something so terrible?" Thanatos moved to kneel beside my chair, taking my hands in his cold grasp. "Because of you, Luna. Because seeing you, hearing you speak about the value of feeling, something woke up inside her. Some remnant of the woman she used to be. The woman who loved you, the woman who loved me," he agreed. "She remembered what it felt like to care about individual lives, to see death as loss, rather than just duty. And in that moment of remembering, he closed his eyes. She chose to save them. What will happen to her? She will be stripped of her immortality, cast down from her throne. The Council of Eternal Judges will condemn her to mortality as punishment for her transgression." My blood ran cold. "She'll die? Eventually? She will age and sicken and die as mortals do." Thanatos' grip on my hands tightened. "She will experience every human frailty she once transcended, every pain and sorrow and loss that comes with mortal existence. But she'll also be able to feel again," I said, understanding dawning. "To love again." "Yes, but what good is the ability to love when you have so little time to experience it?" I stared into his twilight eyes and saw the terrible irony of the situation. Lorelei had made her choice, sacrificing eternity for the chance to feel human again, even if only briefly, and in doing so, she had shown me exactly what my own choice meant. She did it for you, I realized. This wasn't just about saving plague victims. She broke the cosmic order to free you from your promise to her, to give you a chance at real love. Thanatos nodded, tears crystallizing like diamonds on his pale cheeks. "By choosing mortality, by accepting punishment, she releases me from our eternal bond. I am free to love again, if I dare risk it. And the balance that was disrupted must be restored." He met my eyes. "Someone must take her place as Death Queen of the Northern Realm. Someone must accept the responsibility she abandoned." My heart stopped. "You want me to become her replacement?" "No, Luna. I want you to become my equal, my true partner. Not a perfect, emotionless queen like Lorelei became, but a ruler who can balance duty with compassion, justice with mercy." He cupped my face in his hands. "You could be what she never was, a Death Queen who serves with her heart intact. But if I fail, if I become like she was?" Outside my window, the celebration continued. Families laughed and children played, all of them saved by Lorelei's sacrifice. But somewhere else in the world, other families were beginning their own journey with grief, paying the price for these moments of joy. It was the cosmic order in action: death and life, sorrow and happiness, loss and love, all balanced on an infinite scale, and I was being asked to help maintain that balance. If I say yes, I said carefully, what happens to Lorelei? She will live out her remaining mortal years in peace. She will age and experience the full range of human emotion and eventually die a natural death surrounded by whatever love she manages to find. And the people who died to restore the balance, their sacrifice will not be forgotten. They will be honored in death, their souls given places of distinction in the eternal realm. He paused. It is not justice, Luna, but it is the way of things. Life and death must remain in equilibrium, or reality itself begins to unravel. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine it, ruling beside Thanatos in some ethereal palace, guiding souls across the threshold between worlds, maintaining the cosmic balance between life and death. It was a responsibility beyond anything I had ever imagined. Beautiful and terrible and absolutely crucial. What about my humanity? I asked. My ability to feel. I opened my eyes and looked at him. This magnificent, ancient being who had watched civilizations rise and fall, who had guided countless souls to their rest, who carried the weight of eternity on his shoulders. He was offering to share that burden with me, to trust me with power beyond mortal comprehension. Ask me, I whispered. Luna, he said, his voice carrying all the solemnity of a sacred vow. Will you marry me? Will you become my queen? My partner? My equal? Will you help me maintain the balance between life and death? Not as a perfect automaton, but as a woman who chooses compassion without abandoning duty. I thought of Lorelei, facing mortality to give us this chance. I thought of the plague victims celebrating in the square, their lives saved by her sacrifice. I thought of the unknown people who had died to restore the balance, and the families who would mourn them, life and death, joy and sorrow, love and loss. All of it interconnected, all of it necessary, all of it requiring someone to stand at the center and help maintain the equilibrium. Yes, I said, and the word felt like destiny. I will marry you. But Luna's transformation would test every belief about love, death, and the price of eternity. The transformation began the moment I spoke the word yes. Power flooded through me like liquid starlight, rewriting every cell in my body, every thought in my mind. I felt myself lifting from the chair, my feet leaving the ground as ethereal light blazed from my skin. Through the cosmic energy coursing through my veins, I could suddenly sense every living soul in the world. I felt their joys and sorrows, their hopes and fears, their births and deaths. It was overwhelming, and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Luna, Thanatos whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Look at yourself. I looked down and gasped. My plain brown hair had become lustrous and dark, flowing around me like liquid shadow. My skin glowed with inner light, but it was warm light, like sunlight on spring morning, rather than the cold radiance of stars. My dress had transformed into flowing robes of deep purple and gold, colors that spoke of twilight and dawn dancing together. But most importantly, when I looked into Thanatos's eyes, I still felt my heart leap with love. The transformation had made me more than mortal, but it hadn't made me less human. I can still feel. I breathed, touching my chest where my heart beat with new rhythm. I can still love. Relief flooded his features. As can I, he said, and I realized that he too was changing. The stark white of his robes had taken on touches of gold, and his twilight eyes held new warmth. Your love is transforming me as well, making me more than I was. He took my hands, and together we rose through the ceiling of my cottage, passing through wood and stone as if they were made of mist. We emerged into the night sky, floating among the stars, and I saw that the very heavens were celebrating our union. Constellations rearranged themselves into new patterns. Auroras danced across the darkness in colors that had no earthly names. The moon itself seemed to smile down at us, bathing us in silver benediction. Where are we going? I asked, though I wasn't afraid. Nothing could frighten me now, not with this power singing in my veins and Thanatos' love anchoring me to myself. To our wedding, he replied, and gestured ahead of us. A palace was materializing in the space between worlds, not the cold crystal structure I had seen in Lorelai's realm, but something warm and welcoming. Its walls were made of living twilight, shifting between purple and gold and deep blue. Gardens of night-blooming flowers surrounded it, their petals glowing like captured starlight. As we approached, I saw that we were not alone. Spirits had gathered for our wedding, not just the restless dead I had always seen, but souls at peace, angels, guardians, and beings of pure light, whose names I somehow now knew. Margaret Hartwell was there, no longer translucent and sad but radiant with joy. The baker's son stood beside her, his hair clean and his young face bright with happiness. All the spirits I had helped over the years had come to witness my transformation. But among them stood another figure that made my heart skip. Lorelei was there, but not as I had seen her in the northern realm. Her crystalline perfection was gone, replaced by something far more beautiful. Mortality. Her ice-blue eyes now held warmth and depth. Her perfect features showed the subtle signs of human emotion. She looked younger somehow, softer, more real. "Luna," she said as we descended into the garden, her voice carrying genuine warmth for the first time. "You look radiant." "Lorelei." I studied her transformed face. "How are you?" "Free," she said simply. "For the first time in centuries, I am free to feel again, to hope again, to love again." She glanced at Thanatos, and I saw forgiveness pass between them. Not the cold absolution of immortal logic, but the warm mercy of human understanding. "Will you be all right?" I asked. "As a mortal, I mean?" She smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise after endless winter. "I will have perhaps 50 years if I am fortunate. 50 years to experience everything I had forgotten. The taste of food, the warmth of sunlight, the possibility of simple human love. It is more than I deserve, after what I became. And the balance is restored through your ascension," Thanatos said, joining our conversation. "Your transformation has already begun to heal the cosmic wounds. The deaths that were required have been gentle ones. Elderly people who passed peacefully in their sleep. Their souls eager to cross over. The suffering has been minimized." I felt a wave of relief. The price had been paid, but not in the cruel, random way I had feared. "Then let us begin," Lorelei said, stepping back to join the assembled spirits. "Let us witness the union that will bring balance back to the realms of life and death." The ceremony was unlike anything mortal or immortal had ever seen. We spoke vows not just to each other, but to the cosmic order itself. I promised to guard the threshold between worlds with compassion, but not weakness, to guide souls to their rest with gentleness, but not hesitation. Thanatos vowed to share his ancient burden, to trust me as his equal, to love me not despite my mortality, but because of the humanity that would keep us both connected to the lives we served. When we kissed to seal our union, the very fabric of reality shifted around us. I felt the northern realm, integrating with Thanatos' domain, felt the cold perfection that Lorelei had imposed, melting away, replaced by something warmer and more balanced. The spirits cheered, their voices creating a harmony that echoed across the cosmos. Stars burst into new life and celebration. Somewhere far away, I felt souls crossing over peacefully, no longer terrified of death, but comforted by the knowledge that love waited for them on the other side. "Welcome home, my queen," Thanatos whispered against my lips. And for the first time in my life, I truly was home. But even in paradise, Luna would discover that being Death's queen came with challenges she never expected. Our honeymoon period lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th morning of my immortal existence, I woke in our palace of living twilight to find Thanatos standing at the great windows that looked out over both the mortal world and the realm of spirits. His posture was tense, his shoulders rigid with concern. "What is it?" I asked, rising from our bed of woven starlight. Even after days of being immortal, I still marveled at simple things, how I could walk on air as easily as solid ground, how my robes never wrinkled or stained, how I no longer needed food or sleep, but could enjoy both if I chose. "We have a problem," he said without turning around. "A soul is refusing to cross over." I moved to stand beside him and he gestured toward the viewing window. In its depths, I could see a bustling city and what appeared to be medieval England. People went about their daily business, unaware of the drama playing out in their midst. But what made my breath catch was his translucent appearance. He was dead, had been dead for what looked like several hours. Based on the position of his physical body slumped over a writing desk nearby. Yet his spirit stood in the street, solid and defiant, refusing to acknowledge his death. "How long has he been like this?" I asked. "Since yesterday morning. His name is Brother Marcus." He was translating ancient texts in the monastery when his heart simply stopped. Thanatos' voice carried frustration and something that might have been admiration. "I've appeared to him 3 times, explained that his time has come, offered to guide him to his rest. He refuses to come. What's keeping him here? See for yourself." The viewing window shifted, focusing on a small house near the monastery. Inside, a young woman sat by the bedside of a child, a boy of perhaps 6 or 7 years old. The child was burning with fever, his small body racked with whatever illness had claimed him. The woman, barely more than a girl herself, held the boy's hand and whispered prayers. Her face was streaked with tears, her clothes rumpled from days of constant vigil. "His sister," I said, understanding immediately. "His sister," Thanatos confirmed. "The boy is dying, has been dying for weeks." Marcus was the only family they had left. Their parents died of plague 2 years ago. He supported them with his work at the monastery, cared for them, loved them, and now he's dead. But he won't leave because he knows his sister will be alone when the boy dies. Precisely, he's convinced that if he crosses over, if he abandons his watch, somehow the child will die sooner, or that his sister will have no one to comfort her in her grief. I studied the scene more closely. The young woman, she couldn't be more than 18, looked exhausted and hollow-eyed. She had clearly been caring for the sick child alone since her brother's death, unaware that his spirit still watched over them. "What usually happens in cases like this?" I asked. "I take them by force," Thanatos said quietly. "It's not pleasant, but souls cannot be allowed to linger indefinitely. The cosmic balance requires that the dead cross over to make room for the newly born. If too many spirits refuse to pass, reality itself begins to fracture." I thought of the old Thanatos, the one who had ruled alone for so many centuries. I could picture him appearing to this grieving monk with cold authority, dragging his soul across the threshold regardless of his protests. But that wasn't who he was anymore. Our union had changed him, just as it had changed me. "There has to be another way," I said, "Luna." His voice carried gentle warning. "I know your heart wants to help them, but some situations cannot be fixed. The boy is dying. I can see his soul preparing to depart. The girl will grieve, but she will survive and eventually build a new life. This is simply the natural order of things. But it doesn't have to be cruel," I argued. "There has to be a way to ease the transition, to help Marcus find peace without abandoning his family to despair." Thanatos turned to look at me, his twilight eyes searching my face. "What are you thinking?" "I want to try something, a different approach." I faced him fully. "Will you trust me?" He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him weighing duty against hope, ancient protocol against new possibility. "What do you have in mind?" he asked finally. "Let me go to them. Not as the angel of death, but as someone who understands loss. Let me help Marcus see that love doesn't end with death. It transforms. Luna, mortals aren't meant to see us in our true forms. The shock could kill them. Then I'll appear as a mortal, a traveling healer perhaps, seeking shelter for the night. I took his hands. Thanatos, if we're going to rule together, if we're going to bring balance to death, then we need to find new ways to serve, ways that honor both duty and compassion. He stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Very well, but I'm coming with you. As yourself, as a fellow traveler, a scholar, perhaps, who was journeying with you when we saw their plight. A small smile touched his lips. It will be interesting to walk among mortals again. I kissed him, tasting eternity and starlight on his lips. Thank you for trusting me. Always. My queen. Always. But Luna's first test as Death Queen would reveal truths about mortality that even she wasn't prepared to face. We appeared in the city as the sun was setting, taking mortal forms that were beautiful but not impossibly so. I wore the simple robes of a traveling healer, complete with a leather satchel filled with herbs and tinctures that would actually work. Thanatos had chosen the appearance of a scholarly monk, his white hair darkened to brown, his otherworldly features softened to merely handsome. But we kept our eyes unchanged. His the color of twilight, mine now the deep purple of sunset clouds. Some things could not be completely hidden. The city was bustling with evening activity, merchants closing their shops, families gathering for dinner, children playing in the narrow streets. Life continued its eternal dance, oblivious to the cosmic drama playing out in their midst. We made our way to the small house near the monastery, where Marcus's family lived. I could see him now with my immortal vision, a translucent figure pacing anxiously outside the door, his spirit form flickering with distress. He turned as we approached, hope flaring in his ghostly features. Please, he said, though he knew we couldn't hear him in our mortal disguises. Please, someone help them. I knocked gently on the door. After a moment, it opened to reveal the young woman I had seen in our viewing window. Up close, she looked even more exhausted, her brown hair hanging limp around her face, her green eyes red-rimmed with grief and sleeplessness. Yes? She asked wearily. Good evening, I said, keeping my voice soft and non-threatening. My name is Luna, and this is my companion, Thomas. We are travelers seeking shelter for the night, and we heard that there was sickness in your home. I have some skill with healing, if you would permit me to examine the child. Her eyes widened with desperate hope. You're a healer? Truly? I am. Oh, Blessed Mary, she whispered, tears starting fresh down her cheeks. Please, come in. My brother, he was the one who usually found help for us. But he died 3 days ago and I don't know what to do anymore. Behind her, Marcus's spirit let out a cry of anguish at her words. He tried to reach for her, his ghostly hands passing harmlessly through her shoulders. She led us into the small main room, where the sick child lay on a narrow bed near the fireplace. He was indeed gravely ill, fever-flushed, his breathing shallow and labored. But with my immortal sight I could see something else. His soul was not preparing to depart, as Thanatos had thought. It was actually fighting to stay, held in place by threads of love and determination that shone like silver light. What is his name? I asked, kneeling beside the bed. I placed my hand on Peter's forehead, using just a touch of my immortal power to assess his condition. What I found surprised me. This isn't a natural illness, I said, looking up at Thanatos. Something is wrong here. He moved to the other side of the bed, his scholarly disguise allowing him to examine the child without suspicion. After a moment, his eyes widened with understanding. Maria, he said gently, has anyone else in the city been affected by this same sickness? Yes, she said, wringing her hands. It started about a week ago. Children, mostly, but some adults too. They call it the wasting fever. It comes on suddenly, and she swallowed hard. Most don't recover. Thanatos and I exchanged glances. This wasn't a natural plague. It was something else entirely, something that was artificially accelerating deaths, disrupting the natural order. May I examine your brother's study? I asked. Sometimes understanding what a person was working on before they died can provide clues about mysterious illnesses. The moment I saw the ancient manuscript he had been working on, I understood everything. The text was written in a language that predated human civilization. The script of the Elder Shadows, beings that existed in the spaces between life and death. And Marcus, brilliant scholar that he was, had been successfully translating it. Thanatos, I whispered, so quietly that Maria couldn't hear. This is a summoning. His face went pale as he read over my shoulder. A summoning for what? A soul harvester, one of the ancient parasites that feeds on life energy. I felt sick as the implications hit me. Marcus accidentally called it into the world when he spoke the incantation aloud. It's been feeding on the children of the city, growing stronger with each death. And Marcus's death wasn't natural either. The thing killed him to stop him from translating the banishment ritual. I pointed to the final pages of the manuscript, which contained instructions for sending the creature back to its realm. He was trying to fix his mistake when it struck him down. We turned to find Marcus's spirit standing behind us, his face etched with guilt and determination. I can see you, he said, his voice carrying the hollow echo of the dead. You're not mortal, are you? I dropped the disguise partially, allowing him to see my true nature. I am Luna, Queen of Death. This is my husband, Thanatos. We came here because you're refusing to cross over. I can't leave, he said desperately. Not while that thing is killing children. Not while Maria is in danger. I have to find a way to stop it. You're already dead, Marcus, Thanatos said, not unkindly. There's nothing you can do in spirit form, but there is something we can do, I said, an idea forming. Marcus, the banishment ritual, do you remember it? Could you speak it if you had a vessel? His ghostly eyes lit with understanding. You mean a temporary resurrection, just long enough to complete the banishment and save the children. I looked at Thanatos. It's possible, isn't it? We have that power now. Thanatos was quiet for a long moment. It's possible, he said finally, but it violates the natural order. Luna, the dead are not meant to return. Neither are soul harvesters meant to prey on mortal children, I countered. Sometimes the natural order requires intervention to maintain itself. Before he could respond, we heard Maria scream from the main room. We rushed back to find her backing away from Peter's bed in terror. The boy was convulsing, his small body writhing as something dark and shapeless seemed to pour from his mouth like smoke. The soul harvester had come to claim its latest victim. Now, Thanatos, I cried. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. He nodded grimly and placed his hands on Marcus's spirit form. By the power vested in me as Lord of Death, I grant you temporary return to flesh, that you might correct the error you have made. Light exploded through the room as Marcus's soul slammed back into physical existence. Maria screamed again as her dead brother materialized before her eyes, solid and breathing and very much alive. But there was no time for explanations. The soul harvester had taken notice of our presence, its shadowy form rising from Peter's bed like a nightmare given substance. The ritual, I shouted to Marcus, who was already moving toward his scattered notes. Quickly, he began to speak the ancient words, his voice growing stronger with each syllable. The creature writhed and shrieked, its form becoming less solid as the banishment took hold. Pain exploded through my immortal form, not the mere discomfort I had expected, but genuine agony. The thing had wounded me, possibly seriously. Luna, Thanatos roared, his mortal disguise dropping away as raw power blazed from his form. The soul harvester had made a mistake. It had just attacked the Queen of Death in front of her husband. What followed was swift and absolute. Thanatos unleashed the full fury of his immortal nature, his power tearing the creature apart at the molecular level. It had perhaps 3 seconds to realize its error, before it was utterly destroyed. As the last echoes of the banishment faded, Marcus collapsed to his knees, his temporary resurrection already beginning to fade. But he was smiling. "It's done," he gasped. "The children will recover. Maria will be safe." His sister, who had watched the entire supernatural battle in stunned silence, finally found her voice. "Marcus?" she whispered. "Is it really you?" For a few more moments. "Yes." He struggled to his feet and moved to embrace her. "I'm sorry, Maria. I'm so sorry I left you alone." "I don't understand," she sobbed against his chest. "How are you here? What's happening?" "I made a mistake," he said softly. "A terrible mistake that put you and Peter and all the children in danger. But it's fixed now. You're going to be all right. Don't leave me," she pleaded. "Please don't leave me again." Marcus looked over her head at me, his eyes filled with peace and acceptance. "I have to go, little sister. But I'm not really leaving. Love doesn't end with death. It just changes form." He knelt beside Peter's bed, where the boy was already beginning to breathe more easily, his fever breaking as the soul harvester's influence faded. "Take care of each other," Marcus whispered. "And know that I'll always be watching over you, even if you can't see me." His form began to grow translucent again, as the temporary resurrection reached its limit. "Thank you," he said to us, "for giving me the chance to make it right." Then he was gone, his soul finally ready to cross over to whatever waited beyond. Maria collapsed to her knees, sobbing with grief and confusion and relief, all tangled together. I knelt beside her, wrapping my arms around her, shaking shoulders. "He's at peace now," I told her gently. "He's free to rest, knowing that you're safe." "Will I see him again?" she asked through her tears. "Someday," I promised. "When your own time comes, many years from now, he'll be waiting for you." Thanatos appeared beside us, having resumed his mortal disguise. "The children throughout the city are recovering," he reported quietly. "The harvester's influence is completely gone." I nodded, then winced, as pain shot through my chest where the creature had struck me. "You're injured," he said, concern sharpening his voice. "I'll heal." I stood carefully, still holding Maria's shoulders. "But we should go. She needs time to process what's happened, and we have duties to attend to." We helped Maria get Peter settled more comfortably, leaving her with herbs and instructions that would aid his recovery. As we prepared to depart, she caught my hand. "Will I remember this?" she asked. "Will I remember seeing him again?" I looked into her tear-streaked face and made a choice that surprised even me. "Yes," I said. "You'll remember, and someday, when you tell people about the night your brother came back from the dead to save the city's children, they might not believe you, but you'll know it was real." As we walked away from the house, returning to the shadows where we could safely drop our mortal disguises, Thanatos took my hand. "That was well done," he said quietly. "You found a way to honor both duty and compassion." "We found a way," I corrected. "You could have refused to grant the resurrection." "I could have. But you were right. Sometimes the natural order requires intervention to maintain itself." He paused. "Is this how it will be? This balance between cosmic law and individual mercy?" I thought about Marcus, finally at peace, about Maria and Peter, who would live because we had chosen compassion over rigid protocol, about all the future souls who would come to us seeking passage to whatever lay beyond. "I hope so," I said. "I hope we can find ways to serve death that don't forget the value of life." But Luna's compassionate approach would soon attract the attention of forces far more dangerous than soul harvesters. 3 weeks later, we were summoned to face the Council of Eternal Judges. I had been expecting it, honestly. News of our intervention in the Soul Harvester incident had spread through the cosmic hierarchy like wildfire. A death queen who granted resurrections, even temporary ones, was bound to attract attention from the powers that governed reality itself. The council met in a place that existed between all realms, a vast amphitheater carved from crystallized time, where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. The judges themselves were beings so ancient and powerful that they had no fixed form, appearing instead as shifting geometries of light and shadow. Thanatos and I appeared before them in our full regalia, he in his robes of starlight and shadow, I in my gown of twilight and gold. But despite our immortal power, we felt small and vulnerable under their scrutiny. Thanatos, Lord of Death, spoke the central figure, its voice resonating through dimensions. You have ruled for millennia with appropriate restraint and wisdom, yet recently, your actions have deviated from established protocol. I have adapted my methods to serve the greater good, Thanatos replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the beings we faced. The cosmic balance was threatened by an entity that should never have been allowed to enter the mortal realm. My intervention restored natural order by granting resurrection to the dead. Another judge spoke, its form pulsing with disapproval. By allowing your newly crowned queen to influence decisions that have maintained universal stability since the dawn of creation. I felt anger kindle in my chest, not the hot mortal rage I had once known, but something deeper and more controlled. With respect, honored judges. The old methods were failing. The soul harvester existed because rigid adherence to protocol prevented adaptive response to new threats. Silence, commanded a third judge. You are new to immortality, Death Queen. You do not understand the delicate balance that maintains reality itself. I understand that balance requires both stability and flexibility, I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. A system that cannot adapt to new circumstances is not balanced. It's brittle. The amphitheater fell silent. Around us, the crystallized time walls showed flickering images of every decision Thanatos and I had made since our union, the gentle crossing we had facilitated for elderly souls, the comfort we had provided to grieving families, the few times we had bent cosmic law in service of cosmic justice. Show us the consequence, the central judge commanded. Reality shifted around us, and suddenly we were witnessing the results of our 3 weeks of rule. In the mortal world, deaths had indeed become more peaceful. Families found closure more easily. The transition between life and death had taken on a warmth that had been absent for centuries. But there were also changes to the cosmic order itself. The rigid separation between life and death had begun to soften. Spirits lingered longer before crossing over, not in refusal like Marcus had, but in peaceful acceptance of their transition time. The barrier between worlds had become more permeable, allowing more communication between the living and the dead. Chaos, pronounced one of the judges. The boundaries blur. Soon mortals will lose all fear of death, and the natural order will collapse. With respect, I said, why should mortals fear death? Fear breeds desperation and poor decisions. Understanding breeds acceptance and wisdom. Because fear maintains separation, the judge roared, its form blazing with cosmic fury. Because without the barrier between life and death, mortals will seek to cross back and forth at will. Because unlimited resurrection destroys the meaning of mortality itself. Which is why we don't grant unlimited resurrection. Thanatos interjected. The Marcus incident was a singular exception, used to correct a supernatural threat that conventional methods couldn't address. One exception becomes precedent, another judge warned. Already, we see souls requesting resurrection to complete unfinished business. We see families praying for their loved ones to return. The dam of death has developed a crack, and cracks spread. I felt my heart sink as I realized they were right. In trying to add compassion to our rule, had we inadvertently weakened the cosmic order itself? Show us the alternatives, I said quietly. The scenes around us shifted again, this time displaying what would happen if we continued on our current path. I saw a world where death became so gentle and permeable, that mortals lost all urgency in life, where resurrection became commonplace, leading to overpopulation and resource depletion, where the cycle of life and death ground to a halt, leaving reality stagnant and dying. But then the images changed again, showing what would happen if we returned to the old ways. I saw Marcus's sister dying alone and forgotten. I saw children consumed by soul harvesters because rigid protocol prevented adaptive response. I saw centuries of cold, efficient death without comfort or meaning. There has to be a middle path, I said desperately. Some way to maintain cosmic order while still showing compassion. There is, said a new voice. We turned to see Lorelei enter the amphitheater. But this wasn't the cold, perfect Death Queen I had met in the Northern Realm, nor was it the fully mortal woman she had become after her sacrifice. This was something new, a being who existed between immortality and mortality, carrying aspects of both. Lorelei Thanatos breathed. What are you doing here? Offering a solution, she replied, moving to stand beside us. Honored judges, I have spent these past weeks experiencing mortality while retaining memory of immortality. I have seen both sides of the equation, and I believe I understand what Luna is trying to achieve. The central judge regarded her with interest. Speak. The old system worked because it was simple and absolute. The new system fails because it is complex and inconsistent. Lorelei looked at me with something that might have been admiration. But Luna's instincts are correct. The cosmic order needs both stability and compassion. The question is how to provide both without creating chaos. And your proposal? Codify the exceptions. Create clear criteria for when compassion may override protocol. And equally clear limits on what forms that compassion may take. She gestured to the crystallized walls around us. Luna and Thanatos have already begun to establish patterns, gentle deaths for natural endings. Intervention only when supernatural forces threaten the balance. Resurrection only to correct cosmic-level threats. One of the judges leaned forward, its geometry shifting with interest. You propose a new framework for death itself. I propose evolution. Lorelei said. The cosmos has grown more complex since the original protocols were established. Shouldn't the rules governing it evolve as well? The judges conferred among themselves in harmonics too complex for even immortal ears to follow. Finally, the central figure spoke. Very well. We will allow this experiment to continue. But under strict conditions. Relief flooded through me, but I forced myself to listen carefully to what followed. First, all deviations from standard protocol must be logged and reviewed by this council. Second, resurrection may only be granted to prevent extinction-level threats to the cosmic order. Third, any sign that the barriers between life and death are deteriorating beyond acceptable parameters will result in immediate return to previous methods. And fourth, another judge added, this new framework will be considered a probationary period. If it fails, if it creates more chaos than harmony, you will face judgment, not just for your recent actions, but for the cosmic damage your compassion may have caused. The weight of their words settled over me like a shroud. They were giving us a chance, but it came with the ultimate responsibility. The survival of reality itself might depend on whether we could make this new approach work. Do you accept these terms? The central judge asked. I looked at Thanatos, seeing my own mixture of hope and terror, reflected in his twilight eyes. Then I looked at Lorelei, who nodded encouragingly. We accept, I said. Then go, the judge commanded. Rule with wisdom, Death Queen. The cosmos will be watching. As we prepared to leave the amphitheater, Lorelei caught my arm. Luna, she said quietly. What you're attempting, it's never been done before. You're trying to bring heart to cosmic law without breaking cosmic law itself. The margin for error is microscopic. I know, I replied. But it's worth trying, isn't it? If we can find a way to serve death that honors life, to provide endings that celebrate beginnings, it is worth trying, she agreed. Just Remember that the road to cosmic catastrophe is paved with good intentions. As we returned to our palace between worlds, I felt the weight of our new responsibility settling around us like a mantle. We had won the right to continue our compassionate approach to death, but at the cost of accepting ultimate accountability for its consequences. "Are you having second thoughts?" Thanatos asked, as we stood in our garden of night-blooming flowers. I considered the question seriously. The safe choice would be to return to the old ways, to rule with cold efficiency and perfect protocol. But when I thought of Maria and Peter, of Marcus finding peace, of all the souls who had crossed over gently in our care. "No," I said. "No second thoughts. This is who we are now, who we choose to be. We'll make it work. And if we fail?" I took his hand, feeling the strength of our bond flowing between us. "Then we'll fail together, trying to make death a little less frightening for those who must face it." He squeezed my fingers, and in that simple gesture I felt his complete trust and support. "Together then," he said, "for as long as eternity allows." But Luna and Thanatos were about to discover that their greatest test wouldn't come from the Council of Judges. 6 months later, the child came to us at twilight, as they always did. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with golden hair and eyes the color of summer sky. Her name was Sarah, and she had been struck by a cart in the marketplace, a tragic accident that had torn her from life far too soon. But unlike the frightened, confused spirits we had dealt with in the old days, Sarah approached our palace with curiosity rather than fear. Word had spread even among the newly dead that death's domain had changed. "Are you the queen?" she asked, looking up at me with wide, trusting eyes. "I am," I replied, kneeling to her level. "And you must be Sarah." "My mama is crying," she said matter-of-factly. I tried to tell her I'm okay, but she can't hear me. This was the moment, the choice that had to be made countless times each day. Do we follow strict protocol and guide her swiftly across? Or do we take the time to address her concerns? 6 months ago, the judges had given us permission to try a new approach. 6 months of carefully documented exceptions, of gentle crossings and compassionate interventions. The cosmic balance had held. The barriers between life and death remained stable, and the council's reviews had been cautiously positive. But it all came down to moments like this. "Would you like to say goodbye to your mama?" I asked. Sarah nodded eagerly. "Can I really?" "Just once," I said, "to let her know you're safe and happy, and that you'll wait for her on the other side." I took her small hand in mine, and together we walked to the viewing pool that showed the mortal world. There was Sarah's mother, collapsed beside a small grave, her body shaking with grief that threatened to consume her. The child did as I instructed, and I watched as golden light began to emanate from her spirit form. In the viewing pool, Sarah's mother suddenly looked up, gasping as she felt her daughter's presence. For just a moment, brief as a heartbeat, gentle as a whisper, the barrier between worlds thinned enough for love to pass through. Sarah's mother smiled through her tears, her hand moving to rest over her heart. "I love you too, little star," she whispered. "Until we meet again." Sarah opened her eyes, beaming with joy. She heard me. She knows I'm okay. She knows, I confirmed. "And now it's time to go." Thanatos appeared beside us. No longer the cold, distant figure of legend, but someone who had learned to balance cosmic duty with individual care. He offered Sarah his hand with genuine warmth. "Are you ready for the next adventure?" he asked. "Will it hurt?" Sarah asked, though she seemed more curious than afraid. "Not at all," he assured her. "It's like falling asleep in one bed and waking up in another, more beautiful room." She took his hand trustingly, and together they walked toward the silver gateway that led beyond the veil. But just before they crossed the threshold, Sarah turned back to me. "Thank you for letting me say goodbye," she said. "Thank you for reminding me why goodbyes matter," I replied. As they disappeared through the gateway, I felt the familiar sensation of cosmic approval, not the harsh judgment of absolute law, but the deeper satisfaction of balance maintained through wisdom, rather than mere force. Over the past 6 months, we had guided thousands of souls across the threshold. Each crossing was different. Each required its own careful consideration of protocol versus compassion. It was exhausting work, far more complex than the old system of mechanical efficiency, but it was also infinitely more meaningful. Another successful crossing, Thanatos said, returning from his duties. Though I notice you're getting better at the quick goodbye technique. That one only took 3 minutes. Practice makes perfect, I replied, then paused. Do you ever regret it? This new way of doing things? He was quiet for a moment, considering, do you know what I regret? All the centuries I spent believing that death had to be cold and frightening. All the souls I guided across without offering comfort. All the families I left to grieve without hope. He took my hands. This new way, it's not easier, but it's better. A soft chime echoed through our palace, signaling another soul's arrival. We looked at each other and smiled, the same smile we had shared countless times over the past months. A mixture of duty accepted and love affirmed. Shall we? He asked. Together, I replied, as I always did. We walked hand in hand toward our newest charge, ready to offer what we had learned to give: death with dignity, crossing with comfort, and the assurance that love truly does transcend the boundaries between life and whatever lies beyond. The old death had ruled through fear and finality. The new death ruled through understanding and hope. And in that small but crucial difference, the entire cosmos had found a better way to say goodbye. What would you do if you could see everyone who had ever died? Luna discovered that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about choosing between life and death. They're about learning that love itself transcends both.